Yeah, the watershed's a good starting point, but then from there, the engineers are going to narrow it down based on elevation data, distance from the drain. That distance from the drain takes into account the timing of the water, but also the private improvement costs you have to make in order to access the drain. There's hundreds of levels of data that can be used, but also we don't want to engineer to the per acre basis the benefits analysis to death so that the cost of the project goes up. Most folks in watershed would say it's not quite worth that level of detail. But something that's relatively new is that we do have to show now on at least a per parcel basis what that theoretical increase in benefits value is for the project. That's based on a fairly recent Supreme Court case.
And then a good example of, where you start and stop, just with that Sauter complaint, just taking a high level look, and you've got that plateau there almost where it goes from a high elevation down to a lower flat elevation, and just terrain wise, you wouldn't assess anybody above that large drop due to the fact of they're not benefiting on that cleanup or any assessment drain. So that's kind of an easy example just to get an idea of what we were looking at. So
if there's any game and fish property within this assessed drain, what do they take? What do they have? What responsibility?
So Game and Fish is the state agency, or were you intending to ask about the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the federal agency?
U.S. Wildlife.
Or both?
Or both.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Game and Fish, as an owner of state land, can be taxed assessments and benefits, just like any other landowner. Although the burden that land, unless it's being has some kind of water management plan, like a dam or something other than like a pre-settlement condition that is relying on the assessment drain as an outlet to manage the conservation goals of that property. It does benefit, but it is reduced compared to ag land. Fish and Wildlife Service, regardless of how that property is being used, the only way that you can tax that land is if Congress has appropriated funds specifically for that purpose, and guess what? Congress never does. Appropriates funds for public drainage assessment drain. So it's just easier to remember the rule is that land is exempt. We can't tax that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service land. The rest of the watershed ends up picking up that burden of their benefit.
Is it accurate to say that whoever petitions that legal drain, if you start that, they kind of have the beginning start point and stop point, right? If you're going to petition X, or is that not accurate?
Yeah, great question. The Century Code requires that petition to list out what the suggested starting point, general alignment, and ending point of the proposed project is. Now that's just to get the petition started, and so we encourage petitioners to work with an engineer. And we tell them what, it's likely the board is going to continue to appoint Apex, so you may as well start talking to Apex about it to kind of help formulate where strategically is a good place to start and stop that drain. But when I say strategically, what I mean is once that petition is filed, the engineers have to investigate and ensure that the project has an adequate outlet. And if they have to extend that drain longer than what was petitioned in order to get to an adequate outlet, they're obligated by law to do that and to propose that. And so some kind of pre-petition consultation with them to figure out, what has the best chance of being feasible is smart. And that'll help you put that starting and stopping point in the petition. There's a little seed money that goes into that. It's not much. But if the project is approved by the landowners in the vote, all of those preliminary expenses become project costs that are shared by everybody. So if it doesn't pass the landowner vote, then those costs are the responsibility of the petitioners. That's why if you're landowner who's going to lead one of these projects, it's good to get as many petitioners to each contribute a little bit of money to that project as possible, because then they're the ones out there sharing information, talking to neighbors, making sure people who support the project and benefit by it vote, get their vote filed. And they help also feedback information back to the engineers so that the project engineers are designing is something the landowners in the watershed actually want. You know, and that some of that crucial data about the needs and the impacts aren't being missed.
Any other questions? So Monty, I'm going to ask you a question. You being a landowner in that area north of Hurdsfield, what are your thoughts that we, do you think is something we should proceed with, take a look at?
Yeah.
As far as doing something in your area?
Yeah. What? I don't really. I think it takes something more massive than we got funding for.
With snagging and clearing?
Wow. I think it takes almost a water project in scope of a number of water reservoir holding. Yeah, somehow be able to control it.
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee Valley River Authority. We're not funding for that.
Yeah. And that's where, with the assessment districts, if a person goes that route, like all our assessment areas out east of Fessenden here, there's gates all over the place out there.
Right.
Control points.
Yeah, that's what you'd have to have, I think. I'm not sure where this begins though. The James supposedly begins between Harvey and Fessenden, but it actually picks up closer to me, south is where it starts to feed. So I don't know where the headwater is, essentially, but it's.
I think it's more or less straight north of Hurdsfield, isn't it? Or a little bit to the west of Hurdsfield.
Over there by the county line.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
technically it's called between Harvey and Fessenden, but it's beginning south.
It starts way over there.
Northwest of Hurdsfield.
Yeah.
But
Somewhere at the beginning, you have to begin to control it somehow. 'Cause, when you get rain events, you get rain events by me or south, 2 or 3 days, that's flooded out there too.
Mm-hmm.
Comes out.
Mm-hmm.
It's adding too much water right away to the James that you can't control it. Yeah, I don't know. I guess if.
do you think the snagging and clearing option would be viable from Weckeryly's tile pumps to the west onto where it goes across Highway 3 by Shales?
Comes back in there, yeah.
How many miles is that? It's not very many.
I think it's like around 4 miles. Isn't that what we came up with, Thomas? Basically from Sauter's to Highway 3 with roughly 4 miles, something like that.
Sounds right.
Yeah, with an elevation
That's
drop
right.
of about 5 feet.
Could you spray and clean that area out for under $100,000? I mean, you gotta stay under $100,000.
Oh, yeah, on a chunk like that, yeah. Now, I guess that would be another question, Kale. Taking sections of a river or a natural water course, that 100,000, is that just for the whole course?
Or to stay under 100,000, do you just make it a bunch of little sections?
Yeah, it's a good question, and ultimately this same question is what has been the big irk down in Sargent County, if you've heard anything about that Drain 11. Is the project the water course, or is the project whatever portion of the water course you're proposing to do? And the Attorney General did issue an opinion when that dispute down in Sargent County was going on, saying, you can break these water courses into phases or into smaller projects. I think what's clear in the statute is you need to complete the portion of the water course that you're doing as one project, levy the money, spend it, and have the work completed before you start the next process. But the statute just says project. It doesn't say, water course, headwater to confluence or outlet. So I think it's fair read of it to say you could pick a section of the water course and do it as one project. And then when that's complete, then start looking at another section of the same water course. But while you asked that question, I was actually typing up a note to the association's lobbyist and attorney saying in this, I think there's 2 areas for clarification needed in this singing and clearing statute. That's one of them. The other one is the statute says if the project costs $100,000 or less, well, does that mean we can get $50,000 from the state and then levy $100,000 so we can spend $150,000? Or does that mean we can either spend $100,000 or we can levy $50,000 and get $50,000 from the state? The statute should be clear. It's just not.
The bad part about that is that you probably miss the potential of your 60% funding. My prediction was you'd snag and clear it, and everybody'd see the benefit of it, and all of a sudden now it's maintenance time again. It's too bad we didn't do access drain and been done with it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a great Band-Aid approach in my opinion, but I just don't know what the landowner support would be in that area. That's something you guys know more than me.
Yeah, that you can see.
I think that's a good point. I'll just add, based on experience, what I've seen is once landowners are taxed for something, regardless of whether that's 50 cents an acre or more, the expectation then that the government's going to maintain that thing they were taxed for is really high. So that is a common complaint after the project, the water course fills in again is, well, you already taxed us for this. How come now you're not maintaining it?
And as far as the cost sharing for the snagging and clearing, since we're doing cattails, we're not eligible for any cost share with that.
Right. No, the cattail removal and the sediment removal is not covered by the cost share.
So Kale, on an assessed district, kind of touch on what Brian said. Have you ever had an assessed drain and people started seeing that benefit and you just kept going with that assessed drain? Have you ever added on to a finished legal drain? Almost say, hey, look at how well this works. And then, just because you're going to have people on the fence on all this, I'm sure you've seen it all the time. Have you ever added on to a legal assessed drain?
So the goal is to design the project, of course, to be long-term thinking, all-encompassing. But that's not always easily done. Once a project is built, then the assessment district, the board is authorized to levy an operation and maintenance assessment for cleaning out and repairing the drain. And by statute, cleaning out and repairing the drain includes deepening and widening and also extending. But when you use the maintenance assessment to do those drainage improvements, there's kind of 2 things that the board has to keep in mind. One is if the cost of those improvements exceeds that $4 an acre for 6-year threshold, that's a dead stop. You can't do that without a new landowner vote. And then number 2, sometimes when you extend or improve a drain, you're changing the benefited area. And if you're doing that and you're going to use the maintenance assessment, you have to look at who are the people benefiting from this and are they now not paying because they're not in the maintenance district. So if that's the case, then rather than do the O&M improvement, we would look towards adding a layer of a new assessment district for that initial construction. Who's going to benefit from this extension or this improvement? And then, once that is built and that cost is levied against the people who benefit locally from that improvement, then consolidate the 2 and manage it as one district so that everybody benefits from the shared overhead costs that would then be decreased on a per acre basis. And we've done projects where, we've started at the headwater of the assessment drain and extended it much further upstream. The benefits there are all local to the upstream, but they're adding a new burden to the people who have already paid. And so we've done like an outlet fee so that the existing assessment drain gets a break, a medium-term break on O&M assessments for a while, so that the upstream people are paying for the benefit that they got out of that outlet that they never did pay for. If that makes sense. So there are ways to structure that, but how you do it depends on the specific facts of that improvement and who benefits from it.
And then in tiling situations, somebody outside of the drain that dumps into our drain, we can go back and assess them maintenance costs.
Yeah, we work with the association. Yeah, to get that added administratively. It used to be you had to do a full reassessment for the whole district, which was very expensive if you're just adding one parcel, but now we can administratively attach that as a condition to the tile permit so that we don't have to incur all the extra cost.
When that law went into effect, that was as of whatever that date was. We can't go back on that, can we?
Oh, good question. I don't believe we can.
Okay, because we had somebody dump about 800 acres into our drain. Tile pumps.
But it was granted a permit before that law was in place.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So if that one ever goes through a reassessment, then they'll be brought in. But retroactively on the permit, I don't think we have a choice to do that.
Okay.
We'd have to do a reassessment for the whole district.
Kale, could you touch on the ease of exiting tile into an assessed drain compared to not having an assessed drain? It's a lot simpler. Right?
Yeah.
It's a lot liability. Can you just name some of the pros on that?
Yeah, well, so twofold. Number one, the legislature in the tile permitting statute has said if your tile project outlets directly into an assessment drain, then the water board does not have to even give notice of that permit to people downstream of that tile project, which signals, the legislature's belief that they would rather see people drainage through tile into controlled outlets than, surface drains or outletting into something that's not controlled. For the liability piece, liability is governed by a standard used by judges in case law that's called reasonable use. But if you look at the factors of what judges say are reasonable outlets for tile projects and drainage projects, judges expect you to use that infrastructure that's there. So, a controlled assessment drain is highly unlikely to cause liability downstream because that water has the ability in most cases to be maintained and contained within the assessment ditch itself. Whereas if you just pump it into a road ditch and then it crosses a culvert and then surface diffuses over someone's cornfield before it reaches a creek, in the middle of that cornfield, that's a lot more risky of a drainage investment because that surface diffuse until it gets to the outlet, could be cause for a damages claim and an injunction against your tile system by that downstream landowner that's harmed. So that's why the value of property that has an assessment drain outlet is so much higher, is because you don't have that as high of that liability risk for your outlet improvements.
Any other questions? Homework for you, Monty.
Yeah.
Well, the first step would be assess or talking to the landowners around there, see if they're interested in doing something.
Yeah.
And then go from there.
Three of us are so far.
What's that?
3 of us are so far,
Well, that's a start.
that I know of.
I think that is wild speculation, how many acres could be gained by an assessed drain. Is it a section, is it 3 sections? I don't know, I'm not that familiar with that area and the farm ground.
Probably Monty and Sauter are the ones that are hurt the most.
Well, the problem is the James can't take it. I don't know.
That was my question.
I don't see anything besides the controlled flow. I mean, snagging and cleaning. You mentioned in the spring the runoff would go. That's usually not a problem. And that usually goes away. It's the rain events a year like this.
Yeah.
Where you have to.
And it takes forever to run through all those cattails.
Right, but
We see that in the drains all the time. That's why we spray them. every year.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to go drive on the highway here, and you see the James out along, people aren't happy along here, so how are we gonna have it controlled? We're gonna have something, well, it's gonna get there. It's from that point on, which I don't see who's gonna widen the James River.
No.
You know, it's the James, we don't have the luxury of having a drain where you can get into it, it's gone. It's into the James, which is full. So no matter what you do, I don't think you can do anything. Besides a controlled reservoir system that maybe, you know, holding it, like my land is really worthless, you know, make it a reservoir. And if there were 2 or 3 of those before the James, then you could control it. That's a lot of money. And that's a big project. That's comprehensive, what he's saying. That's you know, that's not just our little area. You have to go a long ways. This has to be 10 miles, 20 miles. Well, you can try the cattail thing.
It does help.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen that over.
Especially in the area where it's that flat.
Yeah.
It's so flat there that.
Oh, a prime example, when you guys did the Cottonwood Road over there, in that area, over by, east of Mitch Lloyd's, when you guys sprayed out the cattails and did a little bit of clean out. Does water ever went over that road again? I don't believe so.
I don't think so.
You know, it just, and, you know, there's a group of us that did some, you know, work on the Rocky Run a few years ago here. And, it made a huge difference. You know, we sprayed out, you know, the cattails, and we went in and we actually did some cleaning. And what was interesting about it, the cleaning, wherever these roads wash out, that water, that dirt will go down maximum of 100 yards, and it's all settled out, filling in the drain or the channel or whatever. We went in and we cleaned about 100 yards from the road down. That was it. So you get down to the next roadway, and if that's ever washed out or whatever, then you got kind of the same thing there. But that's
We've seen the benefits enough, and that's why Patrick's full time with us now every year spring.
Yeah.
Because we used to get a helicopter in once in a while, they always came in late. It wasn't getting the job done, and now we've seen the benefit of getting rid of them cattails, and it's just like a standard procedure, just like cleaning them out now.
and it's cut down on our cleanup costs. You know, we don't spend, you know, we finally got through pretty much all of our drains. We got everything, you know, to elevations and sloped and whatever, and now it's a matter of maintenance. You know, yeah, you get these, you know, areas that wash into the drains once in a while, you gotta go clean out or whatever, but just by keeping the vegetation out of the bottom of that ditch, and that's the nice part about what he's doing. He's spraying about an 8-10 foot wide path, and that's it. You know, so we got the vegetation on the sides of the ditches, and so yeah, that's having those guys in that live in the county. They care about what goes on in the county. And before, when we used to get these guys from out of the area, it was just blow and go, you know, and spraying people's crops and, you know, killing all the vegetation that fly right over the roads, kill all the you know, the grass on the approaches, and it was just kind of a disaster. But spraying is, I guess I'm a big fan of it because I've seen what it does. It just makes the water run more orderly. And when water runs orderly, things work a lot better.
Well, you'd have to identify, I mean, I could spray mine, but like I say, you'd have to identify at the point where the James is having a problem.
Mm-hmm.
The point where the James doesn't have a problem, somewhere in there to keep the flow.
Those areas.
You gotta start there.
Yep.
You can't start at the back end.
Mhm.
You know, you gotta start at the.
Yeah. And, you know, hence, that's why we did, you know, we sprayed the lower Rocky Run that time. And I think we sprayed like 8 or 9 miles in the lower Rocky Run. And I suppose, you know, we're gonna have to go back and do that again sometime, but hence, that's why we're having this discussion today, is to come up with some kind of a plan, because it's not gonna be a quick deal, you know. It's just right now, assessment drains are real appealing any thoughts of assessment drains, now's the time. Because we will probably never see that again.
James River Height is, I agree with you, you know, but I was wondering if this was completed and done correctly as an assessed drain. So then, as time passes, if the James goes down, our next event, would it allow it to work properly sooner instead of pulling back so wide for so long? I don't know. But you are right, you may need a holding, and that's something Apex would have to kind of.
And I think Apex could probably handle that question.
Yeah.
Once they look at this, they would have a better handle on it than what you or I are thinking. Right. That'd be my thoughts.
So Thomas, how far did you get into this before I stopped you investigating this?
We were just looking at delineating that watershed. That's as far as we got. And I never did review it. I had someone else do it. And then we got the word that, the complaint is not going to be dropped, so stop that work. So yeah, we just got really delineated watersheds. That's as far as we got.
Do you have any idea what it would cost to take a real high level look at this particular area that we're talking about?
So this area is the same location we were looking at before.
Yes.
West of Highway 3.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
It wouldn't take much to look at. Basically, all we're looking at is pretty much just putting a slope in that channel, correct? Cleaning it out and adding the channel. That wouldn't take much at all.
You have a rough ballpark idea on cost?
Probably, maybe probably 4,000, something like that.
Okay. And that would take us all the way over to Highway 3 or whatever?
Highway 3 down to that 4 miles.
Okay. Now,
Well, I guess the question would be, would you want us to, I don't know if there's any U.S. Fish and Wildlife easements in this area. That's one thing we haven't looked at either. That would add a little bit. That's what we're looking at. Those are the types of things in this area.
and that would give us the size of that watershed correctly as also?
Yep. Size of the watershed, we'd look at where we'd cut that assessment district off on the upstream side, where they wouldn't benefit anymore.
Now, how would that work? Because we got Crystal Lake Drain in there. It's obviously dumping a lot of water into this. That would be included with that, correct? Because that's part of the watershed area.
Yes, it would be.
And of course, we have the U.S. Fish and Wildlife sitting up top that won't pay nothing.
And they wouldn't benefit, like I said before, there's that, I gave this as an example, there's kind of that plateau, it's that hill. Everybody upstream of that, on top of that hill wouldn't benefit from this project, so it'd be more or less the landowners below that hill.
Okay, I'm going to challenge that question.
Okay.
I sit at the top of a hill south of town. I have 0 drainage ditches, and I got 300 acres of water that comes to Wells County 1. I benefit from that drain. Correct?
Yep.
And I pay 100% assessment on that drain. So,
Yes.
I guess I have a problem with that.
Yep.
I'll be honest.
There is a technical group right now that the Water Resource District Association is working on with input from the DWR on that very question, Larry, because for years, water resource districts haven't looked at, what's the benefit values to property. We've looked at the watershed, and that's to keep costs down. We're not trying to drive up the cost of these projects, but a landowner up in Grand Forks sued, and the Supreme Court said, no, you've got to look at the benefit to these properties. And that very thing you just mentioned, that technical group is looking at now. So Thomas's comment, they're referring to it as there's no direct benefit, meaning the drain is not gonna increase the volume ability to run off from the top of those flats or the rate at which it runs off. But there is an indirect benefit in terms of the liability protection. So those people downstream of the drainage going on in the flats, you know, if that drainage is unreasonable, could sue and could get injunction to stop that drainage. If it was managed in an assessment drain, that those improvements are contributing to the need for maintenance on that drain, and then also the drain is providing a liability protection for them. And so this technical group is calling that like an indirect benefit, but maybe it's another reason why to get these things started now. I think there's going to be more complexities and more litigation over how benefits are defined, you know, going forward, because it's relatively new for the state.
Okay. Then the next question would be, Crystal Lake Drain, is that something that we could have a vote on that and increase the size of that drain?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, depending on the project design, because there's an existing assessment district in there, the project design that's being recommended would probably guide, you know, how that's done, whether it's through an outlet fee or an improvement and then consolidate. But we would have to keep in mind that existing assessment drain layer and work that into our project design equation. Okay. So those lands in the assessment drain could be taxed for improvements, but we'd have to make sure that the end project isn't taxing them for anything that they've already paid for. You know, the benefits that they've already paid for once, we'd have to make sure are excluded from this new improvement layer.
Okay. So, obviously, Weckeryly and Mertz said that they would be willing to put in money into something like this. You know the people in that area, Monty, like yourself and whoever else, do you think they'd kick in some money to take a look at making this an assessment district?
Just as far as the study?
Yeah.
I would think so.
Okay. Because obviously the more people that you can get to go with it.
Did Alan tell you no?
Yeah, he said no.
No, we all.
Yeah. Yeah. Al said no.
Al said no.
But he's kind of a small player in that, you know, he's sitting there with 1/4.
Well, but then I think going forward, if you decide to go through the assessed drain, any money you guys put in,
they get back.
You get back. So
Yep.
It's not like you lost yours and Alan didn't contribute anything. Well, you get yours back. He doesn't if you go through with it. So.
Yeah. And if it goes through an assessed drain, then he will get levied as well. So he'll help pay for it, you know, too.
Well, I have to say mine's actually an estate. It's my sister's. It's not productive land, but if it's coming up and it's affecting another quarter I have, you know, it's taking another 5-10 acres off of there. Another quarter over here, I'd like to drain 60 acres of it, but I really can't. There's just nowhere for it to go. You know. So yeah, study. I mean, you have to start there. I don't know. A lot of speculation unless you can get some numbers.
Right.
Yeah, because I think this is kind of how John Polarized and them proceeded, right? Yeah. There was just a handful of guys that decided we want to get this started, and they put their money up front and they got the project started, and that's where it's going. But it takes that handful of people that are willing to do that. And,
If we're completing this same feasibility study for, you know, landowners in the southern part of Wells County, northern Stutsman County, and we're in that process right now. And that process for that specific area was between $5,000 and $10,000 to do that feasibility study. There's some additional requirements with that. It's got some unique features with it. But also this is a larger area, so I would kind of ballpark that price range to do that.
You're really not talking a lot of money either.
No,
If you split it up among
people, right?
half a dozen people.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of doing that. You know, then one person person isn't footing the bill for everything. And if, you know, if there's any idea of doing something like that, now's the time, you know. So, obviously, you know, Chad was here and, you know, that day and said that he'd be willing to put money in, and I think Jeff said he would contribute too. Yeah. You know, if you want to have a conversation with those guys, or if you want to just get a group of guys together and, you know, we set up a little meeting or something and have that, you know, help you guys out, explain more of it or
Well,
whatever.
in that area, and I'm speaking out of turn, there isn't a lot of individuals, is there? A dozen?
The shales.
Shales, Klein Saucers, Heitmans, well, I don't know how far east this district
Right,
could go.
far east would become.
Yeah, I don't know, that's the next question, but yeah, that's pretty close.
Once it hits shales, the river runs fairly decent from
Right.
there.
Well, we're talking shales on the foothills, so.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Dennis Hall,
Dennis Fall,
be another one, right?
yeah, and Kenny Farms, Dennis's, but yeah, Dennis.
Yeah.
Shimke's, right on the south edge there.
Well, you're saying after Shales is closed, but Rick and Russ Miller would be here. They've lost a lot of land up by Updal. They planted that the last 2 years and probably lost a third of it. The river comes out.
And roads in that area.
And, you know, from basically from that area going back to Highway 52, going north, that's where, you know, we've sprayed in there before. And,
Yeah.
And those roads this one we got Joe.
yeah, but, okay, well, you wanna have some conversations with some guys?
Talk around.
Okay.
Say it's actually not mine. It's my brother-in-law was gonna be here. And, should've been here.
Okay.
Talked to a few people.
Okay. And then I guess I can call Chad and Jeff and visit with them a little bit too. Or if you wanna call them too as well, or, you know, kind of, cause, you know, we kind of told them that, you know, Al pulled out and said no way.
Yeah.
And, those guys said that, you know, at least Chad made a comment that day that he'd be willing to put money into setting up an assessed drain, but as far as trying to spray and all that kind of stuff, he wasn't really interested in that. He wants a permanent solution.
Yeah.
Permanent solutions are always better, but
Well, Alan only owns, I think there's,
1/4 in there.
yeah, that's half, that's his boy.
Yeah. And it's in the life estate as well. So it's basically going on to the kids. Okay, well, we'll just wait to hear back from you then. And Thomas, you and Jennifer want to kind of put an estimated proposal together on what that would cost them and get that to us.
Yes, we can do that, scope and fee, and it'll kind of follow what we did for the last one for the feasibility study. You know, there's limits to that. You don't want to go too far, you know, waste more money than what's needed, kind of, just see what's possible, come up with a couple alternatives and see what type of restrictions we have.
Okay. I guess with that, we'll end that discussion. And I don't know, is there any other thing that needs to come before the board at this time? Tammy, do you have anything else?
No, is there any
I
other?
did want to comment on those administrative code amendments.
Oh, that's right, sorry. Yep. Okay.
So I don't expect the board has had a bunch of time to look at them because they are quite extensive, and I'm feeling a little pressure with, there's a deadline coming up September 12th to submit any comments to the DWR about their proposed administrative code amendments. But I did spend a bunch of time looking through them, and I am quite worried. And Thomas, I don't know if you and Jennifer have looked at them, but at a high level, I just kind of want the board to be aware of what the department is proposing for its administrative code changes. So these impact surface drainage permits, construction permits for dam sites and other devices, and then also the process for processing administrative complaints. But it's the permitting process that I'm a little worried about. At a high level, what the department is proposing is right now, they've got guidance to county water resource districts on how to process surface drain permits and construction permits. That's helpful because it keeps that process similar county by county. And sometimes we know in Wells County, we have projects that cross county lines. If we've got one locally created process in Wells County, but Stutzman and Eddy and Foster have a different process, that makes it really harder to manage these projects that cross county lines. What the department is proposing to do is eliminate all of that guidance to counties and say, counties, you create your own rules and your own timeline for processing permits. So that's concern number one. Number two is the department said the goal here, the department said they would make these proposed changes in order to increase the speed at which they process permits, because they were getting complaints from the association and from landowners saying, we come to you for permit and you take too long to approve them. And we know that's an issue for sure in Wells County. But the way they propose the changes is they're saying, okay, we'll give ourselves 15 working days from the day an application comes in to decide whether or not it's complete. But once it's complete, then we give it to the Water Resource District, and now there is no timeline. Okay, well, in Wells County, we can manage that, and we can say we're going to hold ourselves to a rigorous standard and process these things quickly. But what happens if Stutzman, Eddy, and Foster don't? So that's a concern. The bigger concern is once it passes the county board and it goes back to the state, they've set up this timeline that gives them 60 working days to review the information, but at any time they decide that some information is missing or they need new information, they'll send the applicant notice of the new information they need, and then they'll give you 60 working days to provide it, and if you don't, they'll dismiss your application. And then once you do, they give themselves another 60 working days to approve it again. And that's 60 working days. So that's like 3 months. So they could sit on something we've already reviewed for 3 months, decide it's incomplete, and then kick it back for another 3 months. And then once they get that new information back, take another 3 months to review it. I don't know what they were thinking when they proposed this. So I'm just concerned about the timeline and the agency using this process to drag things out even further while claiming that they're on these timelines. I also don't quite understand why, once they've done their initial review and they've given it to us, why they need the ability to then ask for more information after we reviewed it, because that new information, likely would impact the decision that you've all already made. So there's just issues there. There's an opportunity to appear at a hearing in Fargo and appear at a hearing in Bismarck, and there's an opportunity to submit comments via the website. So I just want to know if the board is interested in getting engaged and trying to influence this process and make things better, or if the board would rather just say, we'll just be reactive, and if it's a disaster, we'll address it legislatively in 2027. Like Larry said before, you guys have done quite a bit for the association already in terms of legislative stuff, and I will do it for you. I am not looking for the work, so I'm not encouraging you to do it. You just got to decide whether you want to spend the money to be engaged in it or not.
Do you think we have a chance of changing some of that, or?
I do. I think that I think there are a lot of people watching this very closely, legislators that have influence. I think the director has the right mindset. I think he is relying heavily on some agency folks, and Larry, I know you for sure know the names, I'm not going to say them here, that are just very bureaucratic. These proposed changes were drafted by some high-level DWR agency folks that just love process. And I think the director's not going to stand for it if they get a sufficient number of comments from people saying, you know, this is a nightmare. There's gaps in the timelines the way they've proposed them. I think it extends the timelines, not shortens them. It is really heavy on the amount of information you have to provide up front, which I think providing guidance is good, but I don't see how people are going to apply for these permits without hiring an engineer and a lawyer, you know, to help weed through all these new requirements on the front end. So
Trying to see down the road, Cale, do you foresee this for what we do as being having a big impact on the Wells County Waterboard?
well, I think these proposed changes in particular are going to have a big impact on future assessment drain projects, because those all are subject to these permitting rules and requirements. And then I think beyond that, so that's a direct impact to you. Beyond that, I think I'm not concerned about your constituents in tiling, because this doesn't affect that. But any of your constituents, whether that be private landowners that are farming or municipalities that are doing surface drainage or are digging and constructing dikes or flood control type projects, I think this is creating a bit of a nightmare for them. So I guess it's kind of, you know, how much of that do you think is going to be going on in Wells County in the next 2 to 4 years? And I say 2 to 4 years because if they pass these rules as proposed and it's a disaster, then the next opportunity to really change them is probably like the 2027 legislative session.
I got a question for you, Cale. It was agreed upon between the association and the Department of Water Resources that we would work together to come up with some kind of a solution. Obviously, we didn't work together.
Well, that's a good question for Jack. If they did give a advanced copy of this to the association and let them comment on it before publishing it, I never heard about it.
I didn't either.
So I would guess that they didn't, unless you call Jack and he says, no, they did, but I didn't review it or respond. I don't know, boy.
Well, that'll be a question that'll be asked on Friday morning. Are you available Friday morning for that meeting? Talking between 8 and 9 o'clock.
Yeah, right now I'm free all day Friday.
Okay, hold that spot open. Jack's supposed to
So-
let us know here shortly about that.
I mean, it just sounds like somebody should have a voice in here, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think we can let that.
this has just gotten stupid.
I'm going to make the same presentation to Foster County tomorrow, to Bottineau County on Monday, and then I'm going to talk to Peter Gates at Renville County. They don't meet until October, but you know, just like we did with the legislative stuff, I think all three of those other counties, at least Foster and Bottineau, are going to say they want to submit comments to sharing these concerns. So when they do that, and all 3 or 4 counties are in agreement, I just take the time I spend on it and divide it by, you know, all of you equally, so it doesn't get quite so expensive. So if you're interested, I can do that, but the comments are due September 12th, which is before your next meeting. So I just need the board to, I don't think you need to hold a special meeting unless you really want to, but if you would delegate the authority to Larry to work with me to, you know, approve the comments that address these concerns I've highlighted, that's my recommendation. If you want me to type them out and then you review them and approve them, we'd have to have a special meeting to do that. But this is high level stuff. I'm not going to go in and suggest specific language changes, but I'm going to point out, you know, where there's gaps and how this does extend the timeline. You know, and I guess one thing for the board would be, when surface drain permits come in and the state says they're of statewide significance, existing law is you have to, after you approve them, send those back to the state. Well, if they add all this process and they're adding like an information gathering meeting after you've approved it, so you're going to approve it and then they're going to notice and hold a meeting just to gather more information about it after that. If they're going to do that and they have to approve it anyway, does this board really feel like it needs to separately approve those permits? You could offer your local opinions by being a commenter on that process. I just don't understand, if they're gonna notice and hold a meeting to gather information, why they would do that after you've already made your decision. That doesn't make any sense to me, but I kind of wanted to know what the board's opinion of that was.
Yeah, because we were proposing a bill, the association, to demand that they do this in a more orderly fashion so it doesn't take so long for all these processes. In agreeing to drop that, they agreed to sit down and have a meeting with us to come up with some guidelines. I just find it hard to believe that they talked to anybody. Because obviously you didn't know, I didn't know. It was never mentioned at our Devil's Lake board meeting, nothing.
And that timeline was 60 calendar days start to finish. And this proposal is 15 working days to review the application, then send it to the water board, an unlimited amount of time for us, then back to the county where they notice and hold an information, or the state, they notice and hold an information gathering meeting after that with 30 days notice. And then if anything's missing after that, then there's 60 more working days to get the information, 60 more working days after that to process it. So that 60 days start to finish has turned into, a day in your calendar year if you follow the full timeline.
Okay, I guess at this point I'm going to ask for a motion that for us to participate with the other counties in the event that we want to comment on that.
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Yeah.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Thanks. What I'll do is I'll send those out as proposed. If you read them and you feel like this is the wrong direction, this needs some discussion, the thing to do then is to call Larry and ask if we can have a quick special meeting on it. Otherwise, I'll coordinate with Larry and get them filed by the 12th.
So you'll send them to Tammy and she'll distribute to all of us then?
I'll just send it directly to the full board and Tammy. And because of open meeting laws, what we can't do is, email back and forth on them. Right. So if you get them and you review them and you say, I don't think this is headed the right direction, call Larry and ask him if we could just do a quick special meeting on it.
And we can do that all by Zoom as well. I'll just come to town and so you guys don't have to all drive in. Okay, any further business that we need to take care of?
I got one question.
Yep.
I'm speaking as a board, but I'm a landowner here. We increased the taxes on number one. Mm-hmm. We did, and we spent a lot of money on the project, but we have about 150 yards that aren't done. Why can't we finish that?
Well, he was waiting for it to dry up some.
It's never going to dry up.
Not anymore. No, I agree. I'll just get on Brian on that.
I mean, if we're worried about the spoils laying on the side, which we got in trouble a number of years ago doing, so be it. We have an easement.
Yeah, I think that problem got rectified.
I mean, if need be, lay it there, and we'll go back and pick it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But to wait till that dries out, we're going to be a lot older.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And I'm going to be too old.
Because the plan was that it was waiting for it to get dry enough that they could haul it out of there, just load it.
I know they brought it down. They hauled it out
it's
and dumped it on my ground, 3 miles down the road.
Yeah, and we'll have to do the same thing with this. I was up in that area last week one day and looking at that. Just like, yeah, he just needs to come in and pile the stuff.
Let's clean it up, because like I say, we added $2.
Yeah.
And we spent all that money on the culverts, did all that stuff. We got these guys spraying it, but the ditch won't empty out because you got 150 yards.
Yep.
That aren't done.
Yep. I agree with you.
Mine wasn't done. It was 0. Now it's a berm in front of the drainage on my ground there too, So now I have a pothole before the drainage. It's like, I have to pay assessment on this drainage, but it's got a pothole that doesn't get there.
That never got finished.
Well, it came back and did some, but didn't do it right. So now, like I said, there's a slight, it's not a lot.
Where's that at, Chad?
South of the old 5 there, but,
So, okay.
yeah,
The
on
old
the south
easy.
side.
I know where you're, I mean.
Yeah, it ain't a big area, but it's just a thought. I'm like,
Thanks, Dan.
geez, Dan, 20 yards away from the ditch, but they can't get it because all that soil that was put there not done correctly, you know?
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, we can do it someday. In any of our drainage situations, and Brian obviously is way better at it than anything names.
Well, part of the issue I see too is like to say, we have the taxes on a fine, we got a major tiling project going and dumping into that. We keep adding to this, but we never finish the bottom end to keep it going.
I agree with you.
Hey, that's my stone.
Yeah.
But I would like to see somebody talking to Brian and just have him get out there and.
I'll take care of it.
Thank you.
I could see him in like a half hour.
Well, now I know.
Are you really?
If we get that 150 yards done, I'm out of here.
What did they say? I was crabby when that game.
I know.
Does he have his excavator? Thanks, Monty.
Yeah, see, Monty, talking about it.
Does he have his excavator up there? The Komatsu? Okay.
But they- yeah,
What's that?
Jerry has his hand up.
Oh, Gary, you got a question?
Yeah, a video was showing that was shot on the Hurdsfield Drain. Could I have the location of that video where it was shot?
I guess I'm not sure where that's at. Corey Hart sent that to me. So you can ask him.
I'm asking the board.
Okay, I'll find out and I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? If not, I'm gonna ask for a motion to adjourn.
I make motion.
Second.
Second.
Meeting adjourned. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, board.
thank you.
Yeah, it's one right now.
Hey.